Sriram, welcome to the show. Wow, looking fantastic in a tie, making us look casual.
I just want to say, people might think that I'm dressed up because I work in the White House. No, I'm dressed up because when you're in the presence of the technology brothers,
yes,
there we go.
So you have to come correct.
Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to the show. Long overdue. Why don't you? I mean, it'd be great to start with just like a brief introduction on like how did you wind up in the position that you're in, and then what's the latest update with the trip to the Middle East.
Yeah, let me do that. But before that, I just want to say, John, Jardy, I've known you guys for a while. I have two overwhelming emotions about being here today. One is just pride at what you guys have done with the technology brothers. And second is a fair amount of jealousy because I tried to do this. I couldn't, I failed, but you guys have succeeded and you're crushing it. So congratulations. This is amazing. So
yeah, I mean, we're building on the shoulders of Giants, Clubhouse, Good Time. There's a little bit of that in here, obviously different medium and different format.
There's some alpha and like tall podcasters too.
Yes, underrated.
You guys both.
Yeah, the average height on this call right now is like 6'6". It's great.
Well, it's great.
That's the bar. But no, thank you. Thank you for having me. And by the way, I would say, this is the first platform podcast TV channel that we're talking about this on. When you got to talk about it, there's only one platform, it's you guys. But thank you for having me on. A little bit of backstory. I think some of your viewers might know me a little bit. I've been in the technology industry for a while, working in a bunch of large tech companies. I was at Andreessen Horowitz as an investor for many years. I was doing a podcast with my wife, Aarti, and I kind of been on the block. And the way this happened is a couple of things. Like millions of others, I was convinced that artificial intelligence and what is happening is maybe the most important thing to happen, maybe in our lifetimes, and definitely in the next few years. That's number one. Second is I was convinced that what the previous administration was doing around AI was just the wrong direction and the wrong direction for America when it came to winning the global AI race. So after the election, I had a conversation with David Sachs, who is another podcast mogul, but maybe more importantly, the new AI and crypto czar. And we were discussing some ideas, and David said, hey, listen, why don't you come work at the White House? I was like, well, what does that mean? Long story short, a couple of days later, I got a call saying I was part of the team. And it's been an adventure and a ride so far. And so you mentioned the Middle East, so we're just coming hot off that. And just to set some context, on the second day of the new administration, President Trump signed an executive order. And that executive order had a very clear mandate for the country, for David, for all of us, which said that America does and should continue to dominate the global AI race. American AI domination were basically our marching orders. And we've been working towards that relentlessly ever since. And this trip is pretty historic as a part of American AI dominance. So to kind of understand this, we should kind of go back a little bit. So for the last, say, a little bit of time, if you were an ally in the Middle East or larger other parts of the world, if you wanted to get access to American AI infrastructure, you pretty much couldn't. The doors were closed. You were told to pound sand. There was really no way to really get access to the technology that our friends, a lot of our networks in Silicon Valley go and build. And this week changes all of that. So on Thursday, the administration, President Trump, as part of this historic first visit of this new administration in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi, we signed the first AI acceleration partnership. Okay, and you guys probably read about this in the press, but there are probably three important components that just, I wanted to have the technology brothers have the alpha and have the first scoop on that.
Amazing.
The most important part, the first part, is that this represents a large investment in U.S. data centers and U.S. AI infrastructure. So these countries will be investing in U.S. AI infrastructure to make them as equal, if not larger, than the data centers and infrastructure they're building back home. So this means obviously a large infusion of capital, revenue to data centers here in America. So
that story was kind of lost, right? I feel like a lot of the focus was on the localized investment in infrastructure that various groups.
So just to break it down in language that a venture capitalist could understand, this is something like what we're seeing with Stargate, where there's a ton of capital forming, and that's coming from SoftBank, but it's also coming from Middle Eastern investment funds and sovereign nations investing in American infrastructure. And then there's a whole host of companies that might come in the stack to actually build a new data center. Is that right?
Exactly. Oh, you should be doing our talking points. That is perfect. I would say, look, these countries have AI ambitions, right?
Yeah.
They want to buy American AI. They want to buy our semiconductors. They want to buy our large language model. They want to use us. And so as a part of this deal, they're agreeing to a few things. The most important thing they're going to agree to is that capital, like you mentioned, right? Like, and this is, by the way, net new. This is not part of any existing project.
Sure.
These net new deals will mean infrastructure being built out physically in the US. So for example, if they build out X, megawatts or gigawatts of capacity, this will mean the same X megawatts or gigawatts of capacity in the US. And this is an important point because some of the chatter has been, hey, how does America maintain its lead? Well, one of the ways we maintain our lead is everything that is being built up by our allies, we get a matching deal back home. So that's probably the number one headline. The second headline would be that the vast majority of the GPUs that are, as a part of this deal, which is going to be, say, hosted in the UAE, will be hosted, run, operated by American hyperscaler companies, right? And so, you probably know them all, right? Like these will be large American companies. So they will be running it, hosting it, maintaining it. And this is actually important because this represents a expansion opportunity for all of our companies. This means they get to win market share away from competition from other countries. And obviously there's a huge amount of revenue and ecosystem coming in. And so that's the second key point. The vast majority of the GPUs are going to be run by American companies, often by a lot of our friends in these large hyperscaler companies. And the third point, and this is again something just lost in the chatter, is I'm sure you've heard questions about, hey, how do we make sure these GPUs don't get to somewhere they don't need to be? So there are rigorous security protocols in place. So every GPU gets shipped over. We are going to make sure that that they can't be physically diverted. These are really large boxes. You can't hide them under your T-shirt or your tux and kind of sneak them out the door. You can't really go George Clooney, Ocean's 11 on them. So one is there's going to be a large amount of physical verification and physical security protocols. The second is remote access. We're going to make sure through these deals and through the framework that nobody who's not supposed to have access, especially from countries of concern, can get access. And so these three kind of the core pillars. And here's why this went, right? And I think everybody in your audience who's like a technology person, a technology brother, or in the software world, here's why they'll understand it. What has history taught us in the software industry? The company with the biggest network effect, the biggest ecosystem wins, right? We've all grown up with Microsoft. How did Microsoft win? With the Windows and Office ecosystem. Think about this as the American AI ecosystem. We are getting these resource-rich countries who are critical allies in very interesting geopolitical places to basically adopt the American AI stack, right? Up and down. Right. And so this means they are going to be part of our ecosystem for years and decades to come. And it essentially forms a shield from them ever adopting or using technology, or working closely with some people that we don't want to them to work with. So in a way, I kind of think of it as like a software ecosystem play where we have now have them, tied to the American AI ecosystem.
Yeah, how much have you guys looked at the story around 5G and Huawei and that market dynamic as a comp and something that we as a country want to avoid happening within AI?
I would say that has come up probably every single day, right? Like, which is how do we basically, this is in some ways, look, history rhymes but doesn't repeat is the cliche. So there are definitely some comparisons. I would say the difference here is we are in the lead from the get-go because all the market leaders in Jensen and Lisa or the best models are all based sort of probably places from a few miles away from where you guys are sitting right now. So but we want to maintain that lead. I would say China is close behind. DeepSeek was a wake-up call. What Huawei is doing is a wake-up call. So we have a lead. We want to maintain that lead. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to get these countries who want to work with us. They're like, hey, we want to buy American. We want to buy these American AI companies. Great. Let's have them buy our products, tie into our ecosystem, make sure we have rigorous security protocols in place that nobody else can ever get at these GPUs, and also make sure that they're funding the building of infrastructure so our lead continues to stay there.
Yeah. You mentioned the hyperscalers would be responsible for build out in America. Do the neo clouds have a chance to compete? I mean, I'm looking at SemiAnalysis, the Cluster Max ratings, CoreWeave, Crusoe, Lambda. These are some top up and comer companies. They're not hyperscalers. Do they have a shot at getting a piece of these deals, or is that kind of a separate conversation?
If you listen to the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, when he talked about this, the thing we care about the most is that they are American.
Sure.
Okay, that's the thing we care about the most. Second is that they can, basically sign on to our security protocols.
Yep.
So if me or Zach, somebody's be like, hey, what's going on there? There's somebody who's an American company who's on the line. So absolutely. And I think, so when I say hyperscalers, I don't just mean the
Totally.
top 2-3 companies.
Yep.
I think if these are American companies who are willing to live with our protocols, right? Like, and they kind of get through that bar, they should be open for business. But look, once we get this ecosystem here, you are talking about a few of the some of the most important allies that we have in the region, or maybe in that part of the world, who are going to be forever using American AI, right? Mm-hmm. Be it semiconductors or American models or maybe agents on top, they're going to be bound to the American AI ecosystem.
Okay. Who are the other key partners in building this AI ecosystem? Obviously, the Middle East is in focus this week and last week, but are similar deals coming around, or have they already come around with the Five Eyes countries in Australia and Canada and the UK, or are there other countries that are a little bit more of like jump balls that we're maybe that we're going to see trips or conversations emerge over the next couple months?
It's a good question. So first is so under the Biden regime, there was something called the diffusion rule. And this is only, if those of you have been following this story closely, you probably know this. But essentially what it did is it sliced the world up into basically the haves and the have-nots.
The GPU rich and the GPU poor.
Yeah, pretty much. And trust me, all the have-nots were not thrilled because some of them were our really strong allies, and there was no way for a have-not to ever kind of become GPU rich. And so we've toned it up, and we've done away with the diffusion rule. And I think what you're seeing the last week is the first of a kind of these partnerships. But stay tuned, there'll probably be more. And if there is, I should probably come back on the show to announce it here first, as one does. But, I would say think of this as a template for how do we have a deal where American companies win, we get American infrastructure with the right security protocols in place.
Who's the most AGI-pilled person you met in the Middle East? Sheikh Tanoon would be my candidate, but anybody else that was surprising?
I would say there's a lot of enthusiasm for AI across the board. His Highness Sheikh Tanoon is really, really up there, and he has some very, very interesting views on AI. In some ways, he's almost like a technology founder in the way he thinks and operates. But also, His Royal Highness, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is also a huge believer in AI. All these folks are like, look, we want American AI. They're very optimistic. They try all the products. They are personal users of all the products. They're paying $200 a month for subscriptions. They use it themselves. They ask their team to use it. They're extremely bullish on using American AI.
Can you walk me through how countries are thinking about the control over the foundation model layer versus the application layer? You can imagine a scenario where a country, just hypothetically, any country, invests all this money, trains their own model, but their citizens are still going to chat.com and using ChatGPT. And so the aggregation theory, leads to American AI, and which could be good, but is there a similar push for international countries to create their own application layer products?
Yeah. I would say the game is all about inference in my mind. I'm not sure it's an official administration view, but it's my view. Sure. And I think Satya in a recent earnings call had talked about tokens generated as a metric. So I think this is all about building these token factories, right? And these token factories are critical because they give you healthcare, they give you education, they give you predictive traffic patterns, they help you figure out, hey, what is happening with the hydrocarbons that you're digging out of the ground, and how are you processing it, which is obviously a very important part of the region. So it's all about tokens at scale. That's what the key part are. I'm not really sure whether they think of like training their own models. There's definitely some interesting applications of how do we encode local values and local language in there. But a lot of the conversations I had was about like inferencing at scale for all these applications, so they can deliver to their citizens or to their key infrastructure companies, for example, oil or gas refining, the benefits of AI. So, and there's also a lot of interest around agentic applications. It's obviously very, very early days, but I saw some very, interesting new prototypes as well. But I would say inferencing to deliver education, healthcare, make the critical infrastructure on energy better. Those are kind of like a lot of the key conversations we wound up having. And all of them are like, look, we want to work with, all these large American AI companies or these startups. They often had deals or MOUs. We want to work with these guys.
Is it still, the conversation's probably like 80, 90% large language models, little bit on image diffusion, maybe a little bit on robotics. Is that kind of the general application because of where robotics is? It's exciting, but we're not quite there where we're in the rollout yet.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I think a lot of it just LLMs and creating these token factories. There's definitely some image models. So for example, as I was talking about, when you think about these hydrocarbon refining, there's definitely some imagery involved. Robotics, look, I'm not the expert. I know you folks have had other people who are very, very close to it. There are some early, interesting, startups and companies, and definitely a lot of energy. But not, I would not say that's kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about. The meat and potatoes is large language models, inference tokens at scale, and let's build applications that provide value.
Okay. Sorry, you go and then
you go.
So, I want to walk through like the actual mechanics of how these deals happen to the degree that you can. We've been talking about how Jensen has been on this whirlwind tour where he's at a conference like every day, but usually that's a bear
today
signal.
He announced a huge deal in France,
and then
he wasn't
Taiwan.
there, and then he was in Taiwan.
Yeah, and so usually when you see a CEO on the conference circuit, you're like, "What'd you get done this week?" But he gets so much done every time he shakes a hand. He shows up for an hour, gives a talk, shakes a hand, and gets a deal done. So are these deals happening before the events, and then they're just being announced at the events, or is Jensen just has the gift of gab and does a handshake deal and it's done?
Always be selling.
Well, my secret theory is Jensen has a few clones, right? And he just kind of rotates him around, right? I don't know whether that's like leaking some secret information, but I think like there's 4 Jensens.
He's got early access to humanoid. He's got humanoid.
Yeah, he definitely has a humanoid. But I mean, to kind of contextualize it a little bit more for viewers, Jensen's in a unique position. I mean, it's a multi-trillion-dollar company. Is there anything that startups or early stage founders can learn? Is it crazy for a Series B startup to hop on a plane, go out to Saudi Arabia and try and sell some product there? Or is that kind of putting the cart before the horse and you have to be like a power law winner before you start striking international deals?
Not at all. I would say a few things. One is, how does the government do it? Like, look, I'm new to government. I've been here for like 3-4 months. My past world was VC, where I spent a lot of my time tweeting, right? That's kind of my primary function. But I would say, there we go. On the government side, look, there's a bunch of things which came together. We did away with the Biden diffusion rule. We worked on this. David Sachs, the Commerce Secretary, a huge set of people. I want to be clear, there's an amazing team which worked on this under the guidance of President Trump and the Vice President. We obviously want to get this done before we go in there, and then see kind of the official signing in place. But for startups, I would say, look, these countries are energetic. They want to do business. They're very interested in having companies out there and do deals with them. My suggestion would be that, just get on a plane, right? Just get on a plane, go out there, make a trip, and go see the situation on the ground. It may not be right for everybody, but I think you'll learn a lot if you just go have a situation on the ground, and they are very, very willing to take meetings. So my suggestion for everybody, get on a plane, go see the world, go see how things are out there, then make a decision for yourself.
So these first few months, you've been focused on basically foreign AI policy. It feels like that's been like really in focus. What's going on the domestic side? How much time are you spending with lawmakers, locally, working on kind of frameworks for maybe long-term domestic AI policy and how to kind of wrestle with the coming changes?
So I would say this foreign deal, it's probably not the bulk of our time. It just, obviously, it's a big thing which happened last week. So, and obviously we spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks working up to this trip for the president. But I would say the bulk of our marching orders are very simple. Dominance of American AI, and we are working towards what is going to be called the American AI Action Plan that is supposed to come out, I'm going to say roughly in a month or a month and a half. That is a clock. We have to get this out in the first 6 months of the administration. And that plan, and, I'm not going to I don't want to sort of spoil it too much, but it's probably going to have like two big components. One is essentially how do we basically promote domestic AI? And that means everything from energy to open source to how do we work with regulation, whole set of things in there, which I don't want to get into detail on, but like all the sort of the usual suspects. I think we're going to be focused all, and that is going to ladder up to the idea of like how do we make sure our companies at every level of the stack, from semiconductor tools to semiconductors to GPUs to models to applications to agents to robotics to
energy.
Up and down, right? And that we are winning, and they have a clean runway. And then there is a protect side, which basically makes sure that when we are protecting our secrets, that we are making sure that our when we build these things, that we are playing defense against our competition globally, right? And so if you look at this deal that we did in the Middle East last week, that is a part of that, because we now have. With this deal, we are now kind of got them hooked on American AI. And as they build out this data center, imagine, for example, let's say you're one of these countries, you're shipping over a bunch of GPUs, you're building these data centers, you're hooked on the American AI stack. It's going to be really, really hard for you to say 4 or 5 years down the road, I'm going to work with another team. You're probably going to stick with America. So that's kind of locked in. That's why it's really exciting. But stay tuned. I think there's a lot more we have coming on American AI.
Yeah, what is the actual shape of that lock-in? Because we've heard about it from the CUDA ecosystem.
CUDA.
It's very difficult to switch to AMD, and I mean, this is just in the domestic market. AMD is not a drop-in replacement, even though on a dollar per flop basis, they're becoming more and more competitive. But at the same time, you look at OpenRouter, and software developers are swapping out LLMs every 2 seconds. And you go on X and you see one day it's Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and then it's GPT 4.5 is the hot model. And developers seem to be comfortable swapping some of these things. So can you tell me a little bit more about the shape of the infrastructure, and I mean, to what degree is it even possible to lock in a particular part of the stack if we're just talking about energy or something, or going in or cooling or air conditioning? I mean, as we talk about the massive AI factory, there's a world where the components, they have to be somewhat swappable at a certain point, right?
Yeah, it's a good point. So I would say, by the way, Jensen did a podcast or a newsletter with Ben Thompson of Strategy today, which kind of got a little bit, right?
Sure.
And I'm going to steal one of his analogies, which is the AI stack. So you're absolutely right. But look, imagine you are a country or a company. You made a large investment in America. You spent over $1 trillion. You have shipped over a lot of GPUs. You now optimize them to run either NVIDIA or AMD. As long as it's an American company, we would love for you to work with us. Then you're building the models on top, right? And those models are going to be optimized for the hardware they're running on. And there's a million different details, from networking infrastructure, power, how the racks are laid. There's a million different details, but they all work together, right? Like, and whatever be your model of choice. And we don't really care as long as they're American. And then on top, those applications are also then going to be tuned for those models or the infrastructure you have. So you kind of have a lot of this ecosystem that is going to come on top. And now there are going to be developers, either domestic or international, building on top of that. And they are going to be calling these American models for inferencing, or they're going to be building on top of those American models for inferencing. So I think if you kind of count all of that, there is a little bit of a network effect thing happening where, say, 4 or 5 years, sure, theoretically, there could be an API which lets you switch over. But practically, if you're happy and you spend 4 years with all this investment with America, it's going to be really, really hard to change away, right? And I don't want to ever compare us to like Microsoft, but think about like working with a large ecosystem like Microsoft for 20, 30 years. You're using Windows, you're using Office, you're using all the APIs, and you're getting good value. Probably quite challenging for you to switch over. So I think you're going to see something similar.
Given the DeepSeek moment, has Meta become more of a national champion and seen more as like a nationally critical company? You go back 5 or 10 years, senators were asking Mark Zuckerberg how he makes money. Today, they're like Llama 4, the rollout hasn't been exactly smooth, but at the same time, you could imagine a lot of interest in Washington to have a state-of-the-art open source American foundation model that America can provide and say, look, you can fine tune it. It's open source. You can see the weights or open weights.
We should actually spend time rehashing an acquisition that happened 12 years ago.
But what is the mood around Llama 4 and what Meta is doing?
Yeah. By the way, fun fact, DeepSeek, I think, was a big wake-up call.
Totally.
Fun fact is DeepSeek was the day before I started my job. So I got a call saying, I think it happened like 4 or 5 days after the inauguration, and I was just about to get started at some paperwork. I had a call saying like, hey, there's this Chinese model which has come up. Can you come over to the White House on this visitor badge? Because a lot of people just want to know what's happening. So I was just kind of like thrown into the deep end. We were really off the races. And I do think DeepSeek was a very important moment because look, all respect, there was some great technical work which happened in there. KV caches, MLAs, how they're kind of working around their networking or their hardware limitations. A lot of just really, really good work done. There are also some questions about what was maybe taken or not taken, but some really good technical work done. But I do think two things kind of became very, very clear. The first is our lead is pretty small. So, and again, I don't want to just kind of go back to blaming the previous administration, but, there was kind of a mood that America had this huge lead on AI models. But I think for a period of time, I could be wrong. R1 was maybe outside of O1, the only reasoning model out there. But I don't think there was any other reasoning model out there. And it's kind of pretty high up on all the leaderboards, for at least for a period of a month or so. I could be wrong, but somewhere in this ballpark. So one was, it was clear that our lead was not big. The second part was, I think there was a meme that open source was somehow giving away our secrets. But it turns out that open source is actually a great product that people want to use. There's real value in terms of being able to build on it, modify it, and so on and so forth. I think those two are very, very interesting. One of the things about this job is we want American companies to win. So I tell people, I want a American open source model that just crushes, right? And I want Llama to do well. I think Sam talked about his model, which is coming out, I think, soon or shortly. I want them to do well. I think a lot of us have friends or investors who are investing in open source model. I want them all to do well. But I would love for America to have an open source model which does really, really well, as opposed to one that has censorship and values from the PRC. So I'm game for any one of those, and I think it's going to be an exciting time.
That's incredible. Well, there's a lot more to talk about, but we'll have to have you on again when you have more news.
And for reference, Polymarket has, will OpenAI release an open source model in 2025 at an 85% chance. So pretty likely it happens. But
well, it's just been incredible. It's been incredible to see your journey. We met, it feels like forever ago, 2021, but to see these pictures out of last week of you and
awesome.
Our president and His Royal
It was definitely like a record scratch freeze frame. Yep, that's me. How did I get here, Mo?
That's a cool one. Thank you. That means a lot. And look, John, Jody, we've been through a lot. I've known your story, so congratulations. By the way, my favorite headline out of that whole thing was, there was a headline, I think maybe an Indian newspaper, saying Indian origin man towers over world leaders, right?
Towers,
John, something for us all.
Moggs, he hype Moggs.
That's great. Well, congratulations on the deal. We'd love to have you back soon. We'll talk to you.
Yeah, this is great. Great to catch up.
I will. Congrats on all your success, guys. More later. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chat soon.
Sriram. Talk to you
See
soon.
ya.
Bye.